Hey y'all, welcome to Unit 6. I'm so excited. We are finally here at the French Revolution. This is probably one of my favorite units to teach. I know I say that about all of them, but really, I really enjoy teaching the French Revolution unit. So before we get started, let me just give you a heads up on something. You will not have a test on Unit 6. Instead, you're going to have a project that you are going to work on in class, individually, all by yourself. I mean, not completely by yourself. You will not be doing it in a group. You have a project that you're going to be doing in class over a period of 3 days. 3 days of in-class time to complete this project. So make sure you hold on to all of your notes. You're going to need your notes in order to complete the project. Also, I'm not taking late projects on this. It is due the day that I say it is due. It also needs to be turned in the format in which I tell you to turn it in, which is most likely going to be on Google Classroom. So let's go ahead and jump on into the causes for the French Revolution. Okay, so let's get a little bit of background knowledge before we jump right on into it. Okay, this is probably my favorite political cartoon about the French Revolution, and I love it because it perfectly captures what life was like before the Revolution. The period in France before the Revolution is called the Old Regime, and that's what goes in the parentheses in your notes. French society was set up as 3 estates, and they really were called like the 3 estates. Okay, it was the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. Okay, the first estate is going to be this guy right here. It consisted of clergy. Okay, these are going to be the men with the most power. They had the smallest percentage. They represented the smallest percentage of the population, though, and by smallest I mean it was less than 1% of the population were clergy. Okay, they very seldom paid any taxes, and what taxes they did pay, it was minimal. Okay, so they didn't pay a lot. What they do, though, is they collect the tithes or the monetary offerings to the church from the third estate. Okay, now the second estate, this fancy looking guy right there. Second estate is going to be made up of the nobles. So these are the folks who made up a whopping 2% of the total population. They paid no taxes at all. And they either had inherited the land that they lived on, or they just outright owned it. They were able to afford it. They could buy it. It was their land. So they are kind enough, though, to let the third estate live on some of their lands. But this isn't out of the goodness of their hearts. They charge rent to let these people live on their land. So I'm guessing you can probably guess that this is the third estate, this guy right here. The third estate has all of the rest of the population. So what's that? 97%, because your clergy is 1%, your nobility was 2%, so everybody else would be 97%. Okay, so take a minute and let that sink in. That is 97% of the total population in this one estate. Well, why were there so many people in there? Well, this estate contains the bourgeoisie. Okay, you ever heard, like, some people say bougie if you're bougie? Okay, so the bourgeoisie, and this is basically the French middle class. That's it. The bourgeoisie is the French middle class. Okay, but it also has the lowest class of people in this group as well, the third estate. It also has the peasants. Okay, so these are going to be the folks who were in the third estate, and they ended up getting hit pretty hard by all of these taxes that they had to pay. They also had to pay rent to the second estate, who were the landowners, and then they also had to pay a 10% tithe to the church. So the people who were making the least amount of money, all of these people making the least amount of money, are paying the highest amount of taxes. So think about that for just a minute. How do you think these folks were feeling? How would you have felt if it had been you and your family? What would you do? So take just a minute, jot something down over in that questions column. How do you think these people felt? How would you have felt if it had been you and your family? And what would you have done? Go ahead and click pause and do that now. All right, so France is going to face quite a few problems. It's going to end up leading them to revolution. Okay, so unfortunately, the poorest people in the nation, they pay the biggest amount of taxes. That's not the only problem France has going on in the mid-1700s. Folks are getting pretty unhappy and disgruntled. One issue is the population growth. So families are growing and growing, and as they grow, they have more mouths to feed and to support. So you can probably see how this might be a problem, right? But I mean, really, it's not that bad. We just have bigger families. Well, remember that they also pay rent to the first and second estates. Now the rent is going to be raised. So the people who were already paying out most of their income then had to pay out more for their houses and the land that they were living on. As if having a bigger family to take care of and higher rent prices weren't bad enough. Forgot to click my picture, sorry. So their bigger families, rent goes up. And as if all of that is not bad enough, food prices are going to increase. The cost of food increases. So the fall harvest of 1787 and 1788 had been especially poor ones. And on top of that, they end up having a really harsh winter. So people just, there just wasn't any food growing. They didn't have food to take care of themselves with, okay? So everyone ends up being affected by this, but the group that's affected the most is going to be the Third Estate. This placed a huge burden on the Third Estate because remember, they have larger families to take care of now. And the Third Estate, they're not really feeling so much love for the First and Second Estates at this point in time. So one reason being the Third Estate was the only estate paying out the, they were the only sort, like, hang on, time out. Rewind that a minute. So the Third Estate is the only estate that is paying any sort of real taxes, okay? So the people with the least amount of money are paying out the largest amount of money for taxes, rent, that sort of thing. Another reason why the Third Estate starts to resent the other estates is that the First and Second Estates, they just didn't feel the effects of these high food prices and poor harvests like the Third Estate did. Rent prices certainly didn't bother the Second and Third Estates either. So the poor, and in this case I literally mean the poor Third Estate, they are just getting hit with one bad deal after another. Well, finally, the bourgeoisie, remember that this is France's middle class. This is what they kind of looked like back then. They decide that they want more. They wanted to have the same kind of privileges that the Second Estate had, and here's why. They want to have the same sort of privileges, specifically because they want to have freedom from taxes. Okay, that's one of them. And the other reason is that they want their sons to have the same sort of important positions in the church and in the army as well. So they were just trying to look out for their kids, for their sons, okay? They wanted them to be in a better position in life, okay? All right, so moving on. So who is in charge of France at this point in time? Well, when we were last in France, Louis XIV was the king, and we all know that he lived a very extravagant lifestyle. He built the Palace of Versailles to demonstrate his power and to keep the nobles close to him. Remember, he was scared to death of the noble class overthrowing him. Well, after he dies, his great-grandson, Louis XV, he ruled France from 1715 until 1774. Now, he was 5 years old when he took over the throne. Now, he did not literally rule France as a 5-year-old. There were other people that were there to help guide and make the decisions. And when he became of age, he did become the ruler, but that was probably like around the age of 14, 15 years old. He ruled for 59 years, and he was lucky enough to inherit those debts from his great-grandfather, okay? He doesn't really pay much attention to that fact because he just continues to put France into debt even more so. He spends excessive amounts of money and he borrows money. And overall, he was just really a very ineffective ruler. So when he dies, his grandson, who is Louis XVI, okay, Louis XVI takes over when his grandfather dies, and he now is ruling France. Well, Louis XVI, he ruled from 1774 to 1793. He was married to Marie Antoinette. This is her, a very lovely lady there. She was from Austria. She married Louis XVI when she was 14 years old. And the whole point of why they got married was France was hoping to form an alliance with Austria. Okay, now France and Austria, they had not been getting along. So they were hoping that this marriage would make things a little bit better. Okay. She was 19 years old when she became the Queen of France. And the French people, they did not like Marie Antoinette at all. They did not like her at all. She was a big spender during a time of debt, which doesn't go well with all of these people who were working hard and spending a lot of money on food and taxes and rent. She also liked to play cards, and she was a pretty big gambler as well. And she wasn't that great of a gambler, so she lost a lot of money. She ends up becoming the symbol of excess in the monarchy to the French, and in the long run, she helped provoke the unrest in France, which ultimately led to the French Revolution. Louis the 16th, here they both are together. They're both very fancy looking, okay? They both like fine clothes and all the fine things in life. Louis the 16th he ended up increasing the debt of France by assisting the American colonists during the American Revolutionary War. In an effort to raise the money that was lost in that effort, helping the colonists, Louis the 16th decided that he was going to tax the first and second estates. So I'm sure you can imagine how well this went over. These people who have never paid taxes at all of a sudden, they are going to have to start paying taxes. So now we have the third estate upset. We have the first and second estates upset as well. So we really have no choice but to head into a revolution of some sort. So here's a quick recap. There were 3 estates in France at this time. 2 were well-to-do and didn't pay taxes. The other was middle class or poor and were taxed very heavily. France is in debt thanks to Louis XIV and is going further into debt thanks to rulers who came after him that could just continuously spend money. So next class, we are going to be looking at the events of the French Revolution. Okay? All right, see you then.